So I know I'm a little late reporting this news, but the news broke after I recorded my videos for Friday, and I don't typically release videos over the weekend. So the Portland killer was killed by the police on Thursday. I believe it was Thursday evening, and it's a little disappointing because essentially the guy gets to escape justice. I mean, he was the guy was out of his mind. I mean, he walked up to somebody in cold blood and just murdered him on the streets, and then for some reason was able to still run around and go give interviews with Vice News. And so let's go ahead and get into this story because the sister of Michael Reinoehl is speaking out. And based on what she's saying, it looks like we have done away with a very sick and twisted individual who has been his brain was just entirely compromised by this left-wing ideology that you see sweeping the nation. And I've had multiple conversations with people on the left where I try to speak reasonably to them. I try to speak with rationale and reason, and there just is no speaking to them. And so much of this is brought on by the media, who lies incessantly about not only Trump, but his supporters and just conservatives in general. They cannot tell an honest story. It's always a falsely spun narrative. And it is infected the psyches of these people, where they're in these paranoid, delusional states, and there is no talking them out of it. There is no showing them. It's like the that 1984 talk with Yuri Bezmenov, where he talked about how the goal of subversion is to demoralize the nation, and how once somebody's been demoralized, once somebody's been radicalized, you can walk them up to a Soviet gulag. I mean, this was in 1984, so I'm talking about in terms of those days. You could walk them up to a Soviet gulag, show them the death, the starvation, the maltreatment, and they would still not believe it until you pushed them in and made them suffer it themselves. So it's really, I'm no psychologist. I don't know a whole lot about how the brain works, but I have trouble understanding how somebody's brain can be so rewired that they can lose all grip on reality when they were typically just a normal person. How an ideology can do that. I can understand how chemical imbalances and certain mental illnesses can happen, but when it's coming straight from information sources, mainstream information sources, doing this to their audience, it is evil. It is sinister. So let's get into this. This is from the New York Post. The sister of suspected Portland shooter Michael Reinoehl relieved the feds killed him. So, the sister of Portland shooting suspect Michael Forrest Reinoehl was relieved and also disappointed by her brother's death Thursday, and now fears it will kick off a fresh wave of violence. April Reinoehl said that she knew her Antifa-supporting brother's death was only a matter of time, but she was shocked to learn it was a U.S. Marshals task force and not right-wing supporters that took him out in the state of Washington. Now, we shouldn't really be all that surprised that it wasn't right-wingers, because people on the right tend to not be quite as reactionary as people on the left. And I know that seems counterintuitive to a lot of what we know about the right. And I mean, even you look at conservative news, and conservatives don't typically report the news, we react to it. So the right is fairly reactionary, but not in the violent sense. Not in the sense that we disrupt the law and order and take the law into our own hands. That is a leftist proposition. And sure, there are going to be some people out on the right that absolutely have that capacity in them. But they're not out there doing it en masse like the people on the left are, like these leftist lunatics. So I wouldn't say at this point that this counts as bad news. It's just more news, she told the Daily Mail, which broke the news of Michael's killing in a phone call. Honestly, I didn't expect it to be the police. I expected it to be the people who had a contract out for him. Is that confirmed that there was a contract out on him? I'm not aware of that, and it would be a little surprising to me if that was true. that might have been something of an assumption. I was expecting the angry population of people who were out for blood. Yeah, we were angry, that's for damn sure. But we wanted the law. We wanted justice to take care of it. And that's why we're also not very happy that he's dead, because he now gets to escape justice. He now gets to be a martyr for his cause, which is likely what he wanted. You know, and it's... Yeah, I actually kind of... I'm on two sides of the... Or I'm kind of on... I'm weary as well, because I got a feeling that if we go and we arrest all of these Antifa people, we're going to send them all to prison, and there's a chance that Antifa ends up becoming a prison gang, or at least having a prison gang attribute to them. And just imagine 20 years in prison where they actually have to fight for survival with other gangs, and then they come out 20 years later, and they're hardened. I mean, right now, they're mostly these frail, rich white kids who, you know, the pink hair and the glasses, and, you know, they typically couldn't lift a baseball bat in order to swing it. But if we send all these people to prison, I mean, there's been over 14,000 people arrested, and if they all go to prison and they all end up learning to fight to survive, and they end up forming this Antifa prison gang, which is a legitimate concern, they could come out in 20 years from now, and we now have on our hands a mass release of just jacked up Antifa prisoners who now actually have the ability to fight. It'll be like the mob in the 1980s when all those mobsters got released from prison, and it just kicked off a whole, you know, crime spree of mob activity. I'm a little worried that we're going to see that happen with all these Antifa people. So April continued. Honestly, I didn't... had a contract out from April, who was estranged from the 48-year-old security guard, expects his death will spur even more violence. And we can see the body of Michael Reinoehl is lifted onto a stretcher after he was shot by federal police in Portland, Oregon. And we can see this is where it happened. So that's, I guess, so she says, now we've got two martyrs. That's how the two opposing sides are going to want to spin it. Yes, but the right doesn't hold martyrs the same way that the left does. She said, referring to Aaron J. Danielson, the Trump supporter whom Michael allegedly shot and killed last weekend during heated protests in Portland. Hatred begets hatred. Anybody who saw him, in their eyes, standing up for the plight of black people, being killed by a police officer, this is going to validate their feelings in their minds and all the anger that they have, whether or not it is correct or righteous, April said. And that's a very astute observation. I mean, she seems to really actually have a decent understanding of what's going on with her brother. Again, the right... I'm not going to say that the right isn't going to sit on their hands forever. That's not going to happen. And when the right comes out, it will be justified at that point. I mean, at this point, it would already be justified because we have all of these police departments, all of these precincts that are not doing anything. Now, Trump has done a very, very brilliant thing in deputizing state police, because the problem was the police were arresting all of these people, and then these corrupt district attorneys were not charging them. So the police were like, well, we're not going to go out there and put ourselves in danger, put our lives at risk, as well as potentially catch ourselves a charge if everybody we arrest is just going to be let back go onto the streets. It's making their job impossible to do with any sort of effectiveness. And so Trump deputized the state police. So now when the state police arrest somebody, they can bypass the DA and give them straight to the feds. And the feds can press charges. And so I think that was a very brilliant move, and it could really be used to squash a lot of this rebellion that's going on. It's not even rebellion, really. It's just pure untargeted rage, and it's mostly people who are kind of the dregs of society, the outcasts and the misfits who have not been able to find their way in life, who likely are dealing with a lot of self-hatred issues. And then they're projecting that on how the world looks at them, and they're resentful, and they go out and they cause all this violence. Either that, or they're just people who actually have legitimate mental issues. And that could be a down-the-line adverse effect of closing a lot of the mental institutions that we did in the 1980s. It used to be in the 80s that you could actually send somebody to a mental institution against their will. but they ended up doing away with that for the most part, especially here in California. I think that was one big thing you can call out about the Reagan administration getting wrong is shutting down a lot of these mental institutions because of the development of a lot of psychiatric drugs. Well, the problem is you actually have to take those drugs in order for them to be effective. So a lot of people would get out; they had nobody overseeing them. They were no longer taking these drugs, and their insanity, their dementia, or whatever their mental disorder was, ended up creeping back. And that's why you see so many people on the streets these days, homeless people that have mental illness, schizophrenia. They're not taking their medication, and it puts them right back in this cycle of hopelessness. So, let's see. The teacher and mom of two described Michael as an impulsive person who let his worst emotions guide his actions, and then tried to rationalize them afterwards. She also believed he wouldn't go down without a fight. Yeah, so I think he wanted to be a martyr for this. So I'm not surprised he got himself killed. I'm surprised the police officer did it, she said. I'm relieved and also disappointed by that. April explained, at least it wasn't vigilante justice that got him, because I think that would actually be worse. It would feed the violence a lot more. And she's right about that. If it was vigilante justice, if it was somebody on the right that hunted him down and killed him, that would, there's already a lot of questions about whether Michael Reinoehl shooting Aaron Danielson is essentially the shot heard around the world, that this is going to be the kickoff of a hot civil war. I mean, we're already essentially in a civil war, to a degree, but it's been low tier violence, low tier action. But whether it's actually going to, it hasn't kicked off in gun battles and things like that yet. And so there was a lot of questions about whether this Michael Reinoehl shooting of Aaron Danielson was actually the kickoff of a hot civil war that would lead to literal gun battles in the streets. And if it was somebody on the right that responded in kind, I could see that actually happening. I don't think it's going to. I don't think that it's going to happen because he was killed by the police. But I do think that it could possibly further escalate the leftist actions because he was killed by the police. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation. You either ramp up the left or you meet them and the whole thing escalates. So it's tough to know, and I always sit here and I don't want a civil war, of course. I don't want the violence in the streets. But if a civil war is inevitable, if it is going to happen, which it's increasingly likely, would you rather wait for the left to arm up? Or would you rather just get her done? And while it's a very difficult situation, because while you don't want the left to arm up and get even ground, you don't want the damn thing to happen anyways. You don't want the violence to happen anyways. But if the left is going to continue with all of this violence, at the end of the day, if it's more than law enforcement can handle, we're going to find ourselves in a very sticky situation. So, witnesses said Michael exchanged heavy gunfire. So yeah, he was not. He was in it to. He was in it to go down for this. So he was. Oh, sorry. I was just making sure I didn't miss anything. Nationwide dispute of highly black versus, and now we have an Antifa officer killed. So I can imagine okay, so yeah, I did skip something. But at the same time, the nationwide dispute is very highly black people versus officers. And now that we have an Antifa member killed by the officers, you can only imagine it's going to get worse again. Yeah, and it's going to be, we might even actually see them give up the whole this is about race thing, because we know that's a lie to begin with. This is about communist agitation. So witnesses said Michael exchanged heavy gunfire with feds using what looked like an assault rifle outside an apartment complex in Tanglewild, Washington, just outside Lacey. Assault rifle, I'm sure it was probably an AR-15. That's not an assault rifle. That's a semi-automatic weapon with a .223 caliber bullet, which is generally a glorified .22. It's just got a pointier tip and it shoots a lot faster. But it is a small caliber bullet, which is not what an assault rifle is going to be. An assault rifle you at least have to be able to switch between semi-automatic and at least burst fire, if not fully automatic. So the U.S. Marshals Task Force, comprised of local and state law enforcement officers, was attempting to arrest Michael on a warrant issued out of Portland earlier in the day. April 36 said that while she barely knew her older brother, she was mourning the death and worried about... Okay, so I want to get past all of this. So this is what I want to get down to right here before I go, because I have another article that I want to show here too. Michael, who described himself as 100% Antifa, was killed the same day a Vice News interview aired in which he said he acted in self-defense when he shot Danielson on Saturday. He said, "I had no choice." He said, I I had a choice. I could have sat there and watched them kill a friend of mine of color. I wasn't going to do that. There's two possibilities here. He's either outright lying, which I think that he actually believed what he was saying. I think that he is driven by a narrative-driven psychosis. I think that he actually believed that anybody who is a member of Patriot Prayer or the Proud Boys or a Trump supporter, that they wouldn't think twice about killing a black person. Which is it's an absolutely asinine and insane thing to believe. That is why the narrative that is being pushed by the mainstream media, that is being pushed by the Democrat Party and the left-wing establishment, is driving an actual psychosis that is manifesting itself violently in our streets. And we know that this isn't true, especially after, and I'm going to get into this Daily Wire article here. So, Portland DA, Antifa supporting gunmen appeared to be targeting counter-protesters, allegedly stalked victim. On Friday, Portland's district attorney released a charging affidavit detailing their investigation into the plans to charge Michael Reinoehl, an Antifa member who allegedly gunned down Aaron J. Danielson, a member of a group called Patriot Prayer that showed up to a counter-protest at Black Lives Matter demonstration last weekend. Reinoehl was killed in an altercation. We've been through all that. The affidavit, according to Fox News, notes that Reinoehl appeared to be targeting the victim prior to the shooting, and that he had deliberately armed himself to protect and armed himself for the protest in case of an interaction that turned violent. The interaction didn't turn violent. He turned it violent. Which is what I'm going to get into in a second here once they get into the charges. Because the charges are asinine, especially in the wake of everything else that we've been seeing going on with people on the right. So give me just a minute to get through this and we'll get to that. So he allegedly hid in a parking garage waiting for Aaron J. Danielson, 39, and another Patriot Prayer member. Reinoehl appeared to shoot twice, once hitting a can of bear spray that one of the Patriot Prayer rally attendees was carrying for protection, and once hitting Danielson. Investigators also believe that Reinoehl was a de facto security guard for the Antifa protesters, which is why he was armed. I think he was armed because he was there looking for violence. I think he was there. I think this was premeditated. So Michael Reinoehl, a self-described anti-fascist who said he provided security for Portland racial justice protests, provided security. That just means he went there with a gun looking to cause trouble, probably. Appears to have targeted a participant of a pro-Trump rally emerging from an alcove of a parking garage before firing two gunshots, one that hit the man's bear spray and the other that proved fatal. Police found a single Winchester .380 caliber bullet casing in the street, or on the street, a metal canister of bear attack detector that had a large defect in it, which means bullet hole, and a collapsible metal baton just north of Aaron J. North. It's weird using cardinal directions when you're talking about something that's just laying right next to him, just above his head or whatever. Said an affidavit. That's a very clinical description of it. The allegations laid out in the affidavit appear to support the district attorney's decision to charge Reinoehl with second-degree murder. He got second-degree murder. And this is what I wanted to talk about, because it is very clear and apparent that this was preemptive. This was second-degree murder is typically like a crime of passion. You know, heat of the moment. You meant to kill them, but you didn't go there with the intent to do that, or you weren't actually instigated to do it. With first-degree murder means it was planned. It was planned ahead of time. Now, how far in advance it had to be planned, I'm not sure what the letter of the law is there. But when you have him creeping into alcoves and hunting them down when they did absolutely nothing to elicit his response, it doesn't matter whether he premeditated it a few minutes in advance or, 10 minutes in advance. It seems like, we've seen some video evidence come out that shows that this was an orchestrated Antifa hit, that there was almost a crew involved in it. We saw the person who filmed it from across the street. It was almost like they knew it was coming because they didn't flinch. We had two cars parked right there in the middle of the street in both lanes, not at a light. And then you had another one that ran the red light just before it shot to pull up behind it. It looked orchestrated. And so why he gets second-degree murder when somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse, who was clearly self-defense, clearly was not murder at all, gets charged with first-degree murder, meaning that Kyle Rittenhouse planned the killings of those two people who were attacking him. We are seeing, and this is on top of seeing things like the McCluskeys, who, the people who broke down the gate and started storming through their private property, face no charges. They come out with guns to say not here, and they get charged. We're starting to see this more and more, where we have corrupt district attorneys that are basically filing their charges based on ideological prescriptions of the people who adhere to them, or the ideologies of the people that they're charging. That's a better way to say it. And if you're on the right, you're screwed. If you're on the left, you can get away with anything. I mean, Michael Reinoehl wasn't going to be getting away with this, but he was going to be getting second-degree murder, not first-degree. They were still going to soften the perception of what he did. Although it appears Reinoehl came armed and prepared to use his weapon, he was not familiar with Danielson before the rally and reportedly targeted Danielson as a victim during the demonstration. Yeah, but it sounds like it's not really whether murdering Danielson was premeditated. It's whether murdering a Trump supporter was premeditated. And maybe there's some tricky legality to that. But if you're going to charge Kyle Rittenhouse with first-degree murder, this is a hell of a lot closer than Kyle Rittenhouse, who was clearly acting in self-defense and was actually there providing aid to the rioters, to the protesters. There's video proof that he was not there preemptively or premeditatively to cause violence. So they charged Kyle Rittenhouse with first degree, but this guy only gets second. Now, I get it. That still would have been life in prison, likely. Maybe it would have been the difference between chance of parole versus no chance of parole. During a search of Reinoehl's basement rental unit in Northeast Portland House and 92nd Avenue. Oh, actually, hold on. I got another example. This was I knew I had another example that I was trying to pull out right here, and that was just from today. Breaking: BLM storms stage at walkaway rally in Dallas, punches security guard, gets smashed to the ground, and then the police arrest the security guard. So we've got another example of uneven distribution of the law, or uneven enforcement of the law. And so I'm not going to read all this, but it's actually, there's not a whole lot to read. The headline is pretty much it. BLM, so you can see the stage here where everybody's talking, and there's a video down here. So I'll go ahead and play the video. Let me make sure the volume's up. Oh, whoop, that was the end of it. Hold on, let's just go back to the beginning. So we can clearly see that this guy, the stage is right there. This guy is trying to charge the stage with his bullhorn to take over, and security is doing what they do. They're preventing people from jumping up on stage. I mean, just imagine going to any concert. What's going to happen to you if you try to jump up on stage? Security is going to manhandle you and take you off, just like what happened to this guy. And dude, this guy just got picked up. But you can see he's in the guy's face. He's in the security guard's face. He's up there, like tussling with him. The security guard has his arms wrapped around him, trying to drag him out of there. And this guy is sitting there like dukes up. I mean, of course, he's carrying a bullhorn, but he is clearly agitating, and he's a threat. And the security guard, who's also black, by the way, just picks him up, tries to carry him out, and then the guy still won't get out, still will not turn and walk away. And so the guy, he doesn't punch him. Notice, you'll see he just pushes him in the face, and God, he just manhandled him. I mean, you love to see him get manhandled like that. Maybe it was slightly aggressive on the part of the security guard, but at the end of the day, his job is to secure that stage and secure the people that are on the stage. And this person is coming up behind it, trying to get on there. The security guard's doing his job, but he's the one who got arrested here. So we're seeing this uneven application of the law all over, and even in Texas. So the allegations laid out in the affidavit appear to support the district attorney's decision to charge Reinoehl with second-degree murder. So let's see. Officers found evidence connecting Reinoehl. Okay, yeah. Okay, I already read that part. During a search of Reinoehl's basement rental unit in a northeast Portland house on 92nd Avenue, police found ammunition of the same caliber used in Danielson's shooting and clothing Reinoehl wore that night. Now, part of me wants to kind of make fun of his choice of weaponry, but of course it was lethal. It did what he wanted it to do. But you would think that anybody on the right would not be carrying a .380. It's kind of a lady's gun. I mean, it does the job, don't get me wrong. But clearly, I don't think this person Reinoehl probably didn't know a whole lot about guns. So, and that's one of the things we're going to see on the left is they don't really, they probably mostly just think a gun is a gun is a gun. So, I know that was kind of a low blow, and like I said, it did what he intended to do with it. So, but, I wouldn't expect many people on the right to be going out buying .380s. Because, like I said, kind of deadly, but, he must have hit him just right. But obviously he wasn't a good shot either because he hit the bear mace first. So Danielson was also armed during the encounter. Detectives found a loaded 9mm handgun on Danielson's waistband and 3 magazines of 9mm red tip ammunition. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there. That's exactly what I'm saying. So he had a 9mm with red tips on it. You're not going to see people on the left even knowing what a red tip is. So, they probably never even heard of that stuff. So he was shown carrying a baton in a surveillance footage of pro-Trump caravan in which he participated. The DA did not get a chance to pursue the case against Reinoehl, exactly, which is why I say he escaped justice. Several law enforcement organizations tracked him to a location outside of Portland where he apparently engaged them in a firefight. Okay, so we've already covered all that. But the point is that this guy is able to stalk and hunt down these Antifa, these Patriot Prayer members, and he just gets second-degree murder. Meanwhile, we have Kyle Rittenhouse, 17-year-old kid, clearly defending himself, already shot at himself, responds, reacts, and he gets first-degree murder. It's a very, very dangerous path we're headed down if this is the way that our law enforcement is going to go, if this is the way that our district attorneys are going to go. And I don't know how we solve this. That's why I am increasingly worried about civil war, because it seems like this leftist ideology has infested and infected so many different branches of government to such a degree that I don't know whether there is a legal route to undoing their damage, or whether it will have to be taking up arms. I don't know. I have trouble seeing a way and weeding it out, and nobody wants that war. But I'll tell you what the right wants even less. They want that. They want it even less if the left arms up and actually gets good with using weapons, because the butt of the jokes for now. We can't expect them to be that forever, because we do see all of the like the 90-pound soaking wet genderqueer Antifa members. But there is also the faction of them that are not that, but are just mentally off their rocker. And those are the ones we really need to watch out for. So anyways, guys, go ahead and hit the like button on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Thorburn. Also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Parler at Ram Thorburn. And also share this video, let people know what's going on in this country. And also, if you're interested in contributing to the channel, which would be greatly, greatly appreciated, there are links to my Subscribe Star, Patreon, and PayPal down in the description below. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful night.